So I think to start off, we'll talk about the question that we posted online a couple weeks ago. We asked everybody, what stops you from talking about your anxieties? So actually, Matt, you were the one who came up with this question. Where did it originally come from? Like, what got you thinking about this?
I guess it would be a little bit from what I talked about last week and how I feel like some anxieties are still there, like they're still bubbling up at moments that I least expect them usually. And
Okay.
yeah, and I think I'll talk a bit about it some today too. But yeah, that was the initial. Just I just kind of wondered how other people deal with it.
People had pretty varied responses, which I was surprised at. And so thank you for everybody who commented and shared because yeah, these were really personal responses. So I'm going to read out a couple that I thought touched on some key points that are probably useful to think about, and then we'll dive into one of them. So the first one here, this is a comment from Ginny Whatsit. It's a great YouTube username. She says, I am an open book when it comes to my issues, but I've learned from this that when you talk about mental illness, many people automatically assume things about you. I often get asked if I use illicit substances to cope, in quotation marks, which I do not, in brackets, and if I'm going to hurt someone because of my mental illness. Being so open, I see people often feel as though I'm telling them some breaking news. I found often with OCD the difficulty of people misusing the term like it's an adjective for perfectionist personality, but I'm not silent when people get it wrong. I say in response to someone saying, I'm so OCD, yeah, I love picking on a disorder which 2% of the population has, and use a physical illness to compare the perspective of things. Yeah, I had a nosebleed once. I must have leukemia.
Wow.
And so that was actually the most popular comment as well. Okay, so another comment. This came from Raf, and he gets at. Actually, I don't know if that's a he or she. Raf, we'll just call them Raf. Raf gets at some family issues that you actually see coming up a lot with mental health that are interesting to be aware of. So Raf says, initially, I had only social anxiety, which developed later in life into OCD and more general anxiety. The biggest fear is judgment and what people could do to me once they find out I'm vulnerable. My father has had social anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder his whole life, and my mother always explained it as a character flaw and a good reason to make fun of somebody. On the surface, my mother is very talkative and sociable, but in reality, a lot of it is compulsions to control others and the whole situation. So yeah, father with social anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder, mother with high functioning OCD just waiting for opportunity to pick on somebody with anxiety. And then sarcastically, Raf says, why do I find it hard to talk about my anxiety? Question mark, and then winky emoji. This is a really insightful look at a set of compulsions that often get missed, the compulsions to control people. And that often people may seem very outgoing, but they're actually doing that because they want to completely control the situation so that it doesn't get at their insecurities or vulnerabilities and things like that. And of course, that makes it very difficult then if you want to share about your vulnerabilities because they may see that as an opportunity to kind of, squash you or hit out at you rather than, speak up about their own insecurities or anxieties. So, great point there. The third one I wanted to touch on comes from Aras. And Aras says, I think if I show them what I really feel like, it won't make any difference whatsoever. They still won't understand, and I would have just wasted my time and energy just to make them understand. Instead, I rather choose to do things I value and just experience the pain and feelings that I'm feeling at that moment. I didn't choose this life or these feelings, but I have to learn to deal with them. Also, if I let these thoughts out, they'll become more real and sound more reasonable to me. Not to mention the comments of another person could make it even worse and could increase the anxiety even more. Anyways, by not doing that, I will get better over time, even though I have to experience more anxiety at the moment. We have to show our brains that stuff in our head is not even worth talking about. They do not matter. Our values do. So I thought that one was really interesting because I think it gets at this really challenging aspect of speaking about anxieties and any kind of mental health issue. And it's that you want to be able to speak openly and realistically about what's happened and say, look, I have a problem with this. But you very quickly want to look at what are you going to do about that problem, as opposed to making the problem the focus. Because but you also just don't want to ignore the problem because the problem is very real. Right? Like if you get thrown into the ocean and you almost drown, you don't then pretend like, oh, nothing happened, I'm fine, I can get in the water again. Well, no, because you still haven't learned how to swim, you'll drown again. But likewise, you don't have to go around telling everybody that, oh, I'm a drowner, I have a drowning disorder, I can't swim. Because in reality, you could swim, you just have to learn. So there is like a fine line there. I don't know, what do you think about that, Matt?
I think that's something that anyone with anxieties always battles is whether to talk about it or not. And what we've been doing with Everybody Has a Brain is definitely on the side with talking about it. And I guess I've always felt like talking about it helps, even if it doesn't help right away. Like sometimes it can take a long time, or it might not fully heal itself as far as your anxieties go. But I do think it helps to talk with people that do respect your voice and do want to hear you out. Talking about your anxieties with just anyone might not help. So talking about them with, say, like a loved one or a friend, definitely can help that situation a bit more than not. I have always felt.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Even like they mentioned there in that comment that, if they talk to somebody and basically the other person might not understand it, but if you're already talking to somebody that is going to understand it, and actually somebody that maybe has dealt with the same anxiety before and knows how to overcome it, then that can be a really useful experience. It'd be, like the difference between you go to somebody and you tell them that, I have a lot of anxiety at work. Before presentations, I get really anxious. And that person just says to you, oh, well, I just always drink before I do a presentation. Like I just keep a bottle of whiskey in my desk and then I get drunk and do presentations. Like what's your problem? And, clearly that's not going to be a long-term solution. But if somebody else actually has like realistic, practical skills to overcoming that, then it becomes useful.
Yeah, and there's unhealthy ways of dealing with it, like keeping a bottle of whiskey in your desk, or there's healthier ways to deal with it too. And I feel like I do feel like talking about them helps you explore different ways of dealing with it too, rather than just keeping it inside yourself. It was interesting that person described it as like a painful feeling, because I do definitely think that if anxiety builds up long enough, or if it builds in certain ways, then it can become painful. And I don't know, there's just something about sharing it in different ways that can open up different possibilities of dealing with it, rather than just it becoming this kind of simmering painful thing that you can't get out.
Yeah, I think, and that's that fine line again. Like being able to recognize, okay, I'm struggling in the water. I need to talk about this. I need to get help. And so maybe that's one of the challenges that people run into, because so often we ignore our own anxieties. We don't think, and a bunch of people left comments about that they don't talk about their anxieties because they don't think they're bad enough, even though they're starting to interfere with their lives. And one person brought that up, that, and I think that's a really key point. That's really not about putting a number on your anxiety and saying like, this is really bad anxiety, I should talk about it now. It may not even feel like anxiety to you. The thing that you see is that it's interfering with your life, and I think orienting around that too is useful. Anytime we see that something is interfering with our lives, then it's time to talk about that and change that. And ideally, as soon as you see something's interfering, not waiting until it's interfered with your life so much that you're way off in the wilderness somewhere, far away from where you actually want to be. And I think that's why it's useful to talk about it early. The moment you notice that you don't know where you're going in the wilderness, that's the time to talk about it and ask somebody who knows how to navigate that wilderness. Because if you wait, you just end up really, really lost. And then you're lighting flares and trying to burn down the forest to get people to come and rescue you. And maybe somebody will rescue you, but you'll also burn down the forest and everything around you. And that'll be your family, your relationships, your job, the works. So I think that's maybe one of the reasons. But how do you know when something is a problem?
Yeah, that's tricky too. I think it depends on your willingness to be attuned, to even be mindful about things that are making you uncomfortable, and things that are like realizing maybe if you have a certain normal state or a certain idea of like, these are the things that make me happy. Like that was one interesting thing about what that person wrote too, was they were talking about values. And so I do think there needs to be maybe a sense of what you do value in life and what's important to you.
Yes. Full disclosure, at the beginning of that message, they had a really nice review of my book. And so that's totally probably why values was in bold in their comment. They may have been slightly influenced by reading something that somebody wrote. But I think but that's exactly the thing. Like you have to know. In the Mind Workout, I think I was doing a podcast earlier today about it. And the values part is early on and can seem challenging, but I was explaining, like, it really is so necessary before you get started on this stuff, to know what you want to do, to know what you care about, because that helps you see when something's going wrong. Otherwise, you can always make up a reason why this time's different and this is new and I don't have to worry about it right now. Knowing where you want to go. So too often, maybe, and that's another thing, like too often we do focus on the anxiety. And we think we have to solve the anxiety, but maybe the thing we need to look at is where. So that's the thing we don't like, but what's the thing we do like? And often we don't know what that is.
It's true. I feel like. Before I got involved with anything related to Everybody Has a Brain and even thinking about dealing with my own issues, mental health issues, it was like. It's for some reason it was always easier for me to try and chase the problem really quickly. Like, if I know that I'm having this mental health issue, I need to chase after it right now, and I need to solve that problem. And often it wouldn't turn out well because I would just be obsessed with kind of getting over it or just kind of Xing it out of my life, and that's not how it works really. As I got more involved with Everybody Has a Brain stuff and talking to you, I think over time it just became more important to realize, to clearly outline what are the good things I enjoy in life and how much do they mean to me, and that's helped a lot more than chasing after every little anxiety or mental health issue that I felt like I had.
Absolutely. I find the same.